Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. This is a real honor to have all of you here with us. We have an incredible panel for you, and so I'd love to let them introduce themselves briefly. I know we have a lot to say and share today. So if each of you could just sort of share a bit about yourself and your fund, or how you're investing, then that would be really great. And also, since we have a focus on this panel on investing in diversity, diverse founders, it would be great if you could, include a little bit of the why behind that when you introduce yourselves. I will go first with Luana, since I see you in the top corner.
Sure. Thank you so much, Megan. Thank you for the invite and the opportunity, and a big hello to all the panelists as well. It's a great honor to be here. So I'm Luana Zenela. I'm the CEO and founder of Dividend, Development Impact Managers and Advisors, based in Doha, in Qatar. So we are focused on mapping portfolios, designing fund structures that has the investment thesis of racial equity behind it. And we also spend a lot of time advising founders directly. I'm also the co-founder of GLAD, Global Leaders of African Descent, which is a network that aims at connecting leaders, not only in the investment industry, in business, in academia, the creatives, and really creating an umbrella for Black leadership around the world. I come from a background of activists, family activists. My whole life has been really focused on creating wealth and progress and strengthening Black communities in the south of Brazil, where I'm from. I'm from Porto Alegre. But at the moment, I'm actually in different institutional structures, right? I'm a mentor to the Oxford Women in Business. I'm a member of the Security Exchange Commission Laboratory of Financial Innovation in Brazil. And most recently, we have been organizing demo days between Black founders in the Africa Lusophone countries and pairing them, connecting them with Black founders in Brazil. So rely on that, the Portuguese connection. So, and I also conceptualized what we are calling the first racial equity lens fund for Latin America, but focus really mainly in Brazil. But it's really nice to see so many other initiatives coming up. And now it's really, I'm working with multilaterals and other organizations to see how we can get this fund, launched this year in 2021.
Thank you, Luana. That's wonderful. I don't know if we want to go in the direction that I'm seeing you on the screen. Then next would be Yushu.
Hello, I am not Latino. But I lead a fund that invests in Latin America. So I lead the SoftBank Latin America Fund with my partner, Paulo, who's Brazilian. So he validates me. And it's a $5 billion fund focused on Latin America tech. I also lead the Opportunity Fund in the US, which is a fund focused on Black and Latino, Native American founders in the US, building tech companies. I've been at SoftBank for many years, and I won't bore you with the story before that. But the thing that excites me is tech makes it possible for anyone with the right characteristics to build value and wealth. And often minority founders, underrepresented founders have all the elements that you need to be a good founder. What they're missing is capital. And so that's part of why I'm focused on the things I'm focused on. Is it's good for the world, but also I think it's a great opportunity to make money.
Absolutely. Mac, I see you smiling. Would you like to go next?
Absolutely. My name's Mckeever Condwell. Most people know me as Mac. If you follow me on Twitter, it's Mac the VC. I'm from Baltimore, originally a software engineer and two-time founder. And when I started my first company in 2010, investing in underrepresented founders wasn't a thing. It wasn't a buzzword. Like, I don't even think they called us underrepresented founders yet. right? And so it was a real struggle. And I was able to, exit my first company, was able to raise capital for my second company. And that led me to get a job working for the investment arm of the state of Maryland, where I was able to start the first and only state-backed pre-seed fund for women and minority-led startups here in the United States, based here in Maryland. As a what we were trying to do with that fund was institutionalize the friends and family around that early capital to help founders get going, where entrepreneurs who come from these communities where they might not have networks that they can go ask somebody for 5,000, 10,000, 100,000 to get started. And so we were really solving for that. And I was able to spin out of the investment arm of the state of Maryland to start Rare Breed Ventures, a pre-seed to seed venture fund, investing primarily outside the major tech hubs here in the United States. And we're going to make some investments around internationally. And one of the founders who's the reason why I'm actually raising my fund today, is a Latino founder based in Dallas, Texas, who reached out to me off of Twitter back in June last year, who was building this amazing company, had revenue, but no investors were talking to him because he was a Latin guy in Dallas. And so because of that, I wanted to make an investment in him. I had no way to do it. And so one of my advisors said, well, start a fund so you can make that investment. And so I did. And I am his lead investor in his first round of funding.
What an incredible story. Now, Cheryl, I feel like that perfectly into you. And I also just want to give a shout out, since this is also being co-organized by the Peruvian, is actually Peruvian American. And so it's a real pleasure for us to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Megan. I mean, this is really an honor. So, my first Peruvian event, and really delighted to be representing Republic today. So I am head of venture growth and partnerships. Essentially, Republic is Robinhood, but for private startups. And to Shu's point, talent is universal, but opportunity is not. And so what we do is really help anyone around the world who is interested in investing in startups, invest in startups that have great ideas, great potential, but maybe overlooked, right? 40% of our founders are women, about 20% are Black and Latinx. They hail from about 33 states now. And I think we're really just democratizing access to both investing and fundraising. And so that is really appealing to me because, especially as a underestimated person in general, quite frankly, it's always a delight to support founders that, might not have the means, but they have the grit, the hustle, and are really just a good investment opportunity. It's an arbitrage opportunity. It's something that people should not be overlooking, because that's actually how you make money, is by investing. So I also am a scout for Lightspeed, and I am an investment partner of the Community Fund, which is a $5 million fund backed by Flybridge that allows for about 10 investment partners, majority minority, to go and invest in community-centric startups. And I'm proud to say that actually from all my direct investing, 100% have been to women and people of color. So incredibly excited for this event.
Thank you so much, Carol. Sorry. And I actually was wondering if you could, you mentioned those incredible stats the Republic has in terms of, 40% female founders, 44% Black and Latinx founders. And I remember when I first heard that, it really struck me. You talked about the sort of the democratization of the access to investing in these startups. I think also part of this is the democratization of access to capital for those startups, right? And so I wondered if you could talk a little bit about why crowdfunding could be such an important tool, particularly for these underestimated founders.
Absolutely. So I think we all know the stats, right? In VC, 2% of funding goes to female founders. About the same goes to POC, and it's something that we need to change just through the structure of venture capital, right? VCs really have the power to give the benefit of the doubt. And that's something that I think is I see it myself when I'm trying to do direct investments, where it's also very subjective. Like, VCs are humans. We have sometimes bad days. You might catch us on a bad day or at a bad time. I'm sometimes swamped with deals, and I or bandwidth really to deal with other new opportunities that might be incredible. It's just, you know, I color code my emails. I make sure that I'm on top of things, but that's not going to save me at the end of the day, right? And so that's why what we're really trying to do is taking that power and really allowing for anyone to give the benefit out, to use their experiences, understand, you know, their industries, and really figure out if they want to deploy their dollars. And I think what's really cool is that through Republic, with crowd investing, you can invest as little as $10, $50, and it's also very founder friendly, right? We created something called the Crowd Safe, which basically takes the Y Combinator simple agreement for future equity, and we essentially applied it to the crowd. So that allows for all investors in a crowd investing campaign to roll up into one line item in the cap table. They have no voting information rights, and they only convert at the very end. So like a trigger event if the company either IPOs, gets acquired. And so to that end, it's something where it's very founder friendly, it's pretty VC friendly, and it's something that we think is complementary to VC. A lot of our companies have also raised VC. About 30% have been bootstrapped, and so we want to support them as well. And that's the reason why I think this is so important. We're really using technology to level the playing field.
Yeah, thank you so much. You mentioned something, you know, the subjectivity of VC, and actually something I've been wondering a lot about is like, I don't know if any of you guys have read Malcolm Gladwell's latest book, Talking with Strangers, but he talks about this study that was done in New York with judges in terms of like letting people out on bail, and how the judges are just absolutely fallible, right? Like the computer every single time is more accurate as to like whether someone would reoffend while they're out on bail or not. And I've been wondering ever since reading that. And so Malcolm Gladwell, if somehow this gets to you, I would love to see that kind of data on venture capital, because, you know, this is us, you know, we invest in the founders, right? Like we're founder focused. But of course, that opens up a lot of potential for bias and subjectivity.
Yeah, actually, to that point too, I remember my behavioral economics class. One thing that stuck to me about judges was that after lunch, they were more likely to give like a positive result, like, you know, that they were, you know, usually more lenient after eating lunch. And that to me is just something is like, I can't believe we have judges. Like you want to like increase your odds by, you know, changing your appointment, right? Like it's just one of those things that you can't necessarily control. And quite frankly, like I think VC, a new HBR article just came out around how like 60% of deals come through referrals, and so it really is network based, and you want to make sure that, you know, you have a very diverse network, but at the same time, like due to bandwidth, you can only do so much. I think Harlem Capital recently said too in their case study that because of COVID and everything, when things shut down last March, that they were only just taking direct referrals, right? And so it's like even folks that are focused on, you know, diverse founders and stuff are still leaning on their network to get them, and it's just one of those things where it's fallible and biased.
So there's one thing we learned. Sorry, Mac, but there's one thing we learned.
Triggered everyone.
Yeah, in a good way, show. There's one thing we learned with the Opportunity Fund, which again is focused on Black, Latino, and Native American founders in the U.S., which is when you ask people to fill out a form and just put in their information and attach a deck, everybody wins. Because when a strong, warm referrer sends you something by email, you're going to prioritize looking at that first, and you'll get to other stuff later. And that's always the case. It's always a bandwidth issue. If everyone is told, put your information in here and we'll take a look at it, and you just sift through it, you'd be surprised how much more objective you are. Also, it doesn't rely on the charisma of a phone call or the charisma of a meeting. And I think Zoom has helped that as well. So we are no longer barred from having conversations with people in Alabama or Ohio or Philadelphia, where the Opportunity Fund has made investments because of distance. You don't have to come see us and kiss the ring and wait in the lobby and have the energy and drink an espresso and then like put forth your best self. So I think tech can democratize things so much more if we take away the bias to look in someone's eyes and try to suss out what their motivations are, which is the problem with the judges. I mean, in the book, it is exactly that point of, I want to look in this person's eyes and see if they're really guilty, and that doesn't work. So I'm in a way grateful for COVID for that reason, because I think it's helped us all be a little more democratic, and I'm grateful for blind forums where everyone just has to do the same thing, apply, and we will look at it. Matt, sorry.
No, you're fine. I would say, for me, ever since I started with the state, like, that's how we did things, right? And like, forums are great, but like, even beyond then, I was always helping founders all over the country, right? But the thing is, even with the forum, even with all that, they still got to come pitch to you. You don't give them money after the forum. And that's where the biases really come in. And for us at Rare Breed, the big thing I've always told my founders, told my team is, I never want to be the fund that misses out on the next Sphinx, right? Or the next company in the industry that I don't understand or might not know or might not be culturally relevant. And the way we get around that is we focus around some key metrics around customer acquisition, experience, or retention. I don't care who you are, what you look like, what industry you're in. As long as the market's large enough and you can demonstrate that you can focus around those things, well, we can probably make an investment. I don't have to understand the industry 100%. I don't have to know all the ins and outs. You're the founder, you're the specialist. What I need to understand is, what are you doing special and unique that makes your customers love you? If I can get there, we can figure things out. And that's how we avoid, some of these biases. And so I'm going to tell another story. And this is a story Cheryl's probably heard like 50 times. And so, one of the other founder who's the reason why I started my fund is a Black woman here in Baltimore who is in the process of creating the first tumble dryer that can dry a wig or hair extension in 15 minutes with no heat. She spent 4 years of having people tell her no and shutting the door in her face because they didn't understand the market she was going after. And they told her she was too early and all these other things, to the point where this woman became a surrogate mother to raise the capital to start building her prototype, right? Like that's what happens with bias, right? And so like the question is, how do we get around that? And it's the folks here, on this panel who are doing things about that, right? Like, had she thought to be on Republic, that's a forum where the community of individuals who love what she's trying to do and understand the product are going to say, of course I want that. I want to invest in that. Of course that's going to make money. But it's when, when founders like her get into rooms with investors that don't look like the folks on this panel, that then get doors shut in their face time and time again. That's really, I think, what all of us are here all about.
Yeah, and also in my experience, also working in an international organization in Latin America, where race and racial inequality is quite peculiar, in a sense where everybody says there's racism, but nobody acknowledges that is that is racist. No, so in my experience, structuring the big loans, right, with governments, with development banks. So I recall this one when we were structuring the first project of the Inter-American Development Bank to support Afro entrepreneurs, right? And we partner with the best of the best accelerators in the country. We wanted to give Afro entrepreneurs the best shot at, with investors. And we trained them. They went through the same process as any other, major, any other company would, with privilege, let's say, would be able to. But it's still, when it came to us sitting and introducing, so the institution, the IDB, took upon itself to do the warm intro, because we knew that if we were to do the warm intro, maybe the industry would believe us, that there is potential here. And even so, we still heard things like, yeah, I see what you guys are doing, but this is philanthropy. but this is activism, but this is, you know, I don't see how I can make money on the long term, right? And this went to become companies that are making money, are making a lot of money today. But there was just this reluctance of thinking when we are talking about diverse founders, we are talking about philanthropy. You know, there is that automatic association. And it's not, as you know, so yeah, and until GPs look very critically at their LinkedIn profile and see, okay, are my connections really representing, you know, the representative of the diversity that I want to create in my fund? You know, until fund managers look, in Brazil, for example, do I have 56% of my networks being Black? Do I have 51% being women? You know, do I have 10% persons with disability? If the answer is no, 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 it's much more likely than any warm entry you're gonna receive. It's not gonna come for those groups. So yeah, so that's the experience we have had, and the industry is still really battling, you know, with biases. But this last year, with all that happened with George Floyd, we've seen things changing slowly. The hill is steep, but the pace has been slow. And we hope that the more we show success cases, the better, you know, the more they opens, new doors opens for future diverse founders.
I just want to build on that really briefly. I think, so we talk about investment themes a lot. The whole industry talks about investment themes, AI and VR and what have you. I think purpose is going to be one of the biggest investment themes over the next 100 years, because everyone will incrementally, with each new baby born, care about it a little bit more. Generationally, there's a shift happening in our view of purpose, whether it's climate or gender or race. ESG is now the thing that covers all those topics, environmental, social governance. Larry Fink at BlackRock is starting to talk about it. It's escalating to the point where it's becoming a Davos topic, and it's just the beginning. So cloud is an interesting theme, and you know, China is an interesting theme, and AI is an interesting theme, but purpose, I think, is one of the most interesting themes to invest against for capitalist reasons over the next 100 years, because it's going to drive more and more and more decisions. So if you're ahead of that thinking, I think you're in a very good spot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if, you know, we've talked a lot about the business case for diversity. And I know that, I mean, each and every one of you, I think for each and every one on this panel, that's clear. But I think there's probably some people listening today for whom it's not as obvious, and for whom, you know, as Luana, you were just saying, you know, they still hear diversity and they think impact or they think philanthropy. And so I wondered if, and this is kind of, I'm going to toss this out to any of you, you could just share a little bit more about that business case. Like, why is this actually being a better capitalist for us to go out there and do the extra work to go and source these and support the growth of these underrepresented founders?
Yeah, let me focus on the case for Black women founders in Brazil in particular. Okay, so there is a tremendous untapped potential there. Okay, of women of color founders, Afro-descendant, and also indigenous women. Okay, in Brazil alone, there are 2.6 million Afro entrepreneurs with higher education. Okay, that's in general, because that's the other bias, thinking that Afro and indigenous entrepreneurs are the ones selling coconut at the beach, right? These are the Afro entrepreneurs. That's the imaginary of a lot of people still, no? They use a lot of the concept of survival entrepreneur vis-a-vis opportunity entrepreneur, which I don't like that kind of concept, because every business is an opportunity, you know? So if we go back to that statistics, 2.6 million entrepreneurs, Afro-entrepreneurs with higher education. Out of the 13 million entrepreneurs, Afro-entrepreneurs that Brazil has, the number of Afro-entrepreneurs with higher education in the last 10 years has increased 5-fold. So the pace with which highly educated Afro, let's say, led companies are growing at, is tremendous, okay? And then if we look at for Black women alone, they went from being 4% of Afro women entrepreneurs having higher education to, 25, 30% of Afro women having education. So they have been growing at a much faster pace than any other company. The number of Afro-led companies that hire employees has also increased tremendously higher than any other type of company. So among Black women, they have the number of Black women hiring at least one person has increased 45% in the last 10 years in comparison to white men, which has decreased 5%, right? So, and then, of course, there are all these studies that you see from Deloitte, from McKinsey, the power of diversity in both in the portfolio. We have seen this over and over, both as diversity among fund managers as well as in the portfolio. But even though you see this tremendous growth and this tremendous potential of women of color and founders, diverse founders, they still, the estimate lack of capital that they have today for women, the IDB estimates is about 93 billion unattended demand for capital, is the capital gap for women, and 35 to 40% of Black-owned businesses report having unmet credit demands. That means they went to the bank, they needed money, and that demand was not met, okay, for any reason, right? So when we look at that, and then we look at the numbers of highly educated and highly capable entrepreneurs, we see that there is something, that is really, the math does not add up. A huge demand for capital and really no targeted initiatives, insufficient initiatives targeting this segment. So, and even when you look also at the innovation ecosystem, right? The number of incubators focusing on those entrepreneurs, you also see a tremendous gap there. You go to Cubo in São Paulo, you go to, different huge incubators in Brazil, and you don't see Blacks anywhere. We don't have a study, we don't have data collected for this. What is the diversity of the innovation ecosystem? Maybe SoftBank can fund something like that. That would be awesome.
We're working on that, actually.
Let's work together on it, Luana, in Brazil. Let's work together on it.
Yeah. So yeah, there is a tremendous potential. We just need to look at the numbers and the demand that is out there.
I'll keep it short and sweet. Talking about Latino entrepreneurs, I don't know if you guys know the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative, where every single year they produce a really extensive report on the state of Latino entrepreneurship in America. And it's really interesting because Latino-owned businesses actually increased at a rate of 34% last year, compared to just 1% of other ethnicities. And it was just really interesting to see that because, since VC funding to Latinx folks is minuscule, it seems like there's a real just chasm between, how much we're generating, like I think $500 billion in revenue just through our entrepreneurship ourselves. A lot of times, at the same time, not being able to get the capital that you need through venture. And so it's just clear math and the fiduciary duty for venture capitalists to look into where there's a white space and something to support. And so that's just my 2 cents there.
I'd also say that there's a really powerful concept in public markets called alpha. Basically, what alpha means is you're non-consensus, meaning you're not doing what everyone else is doing, and you're also right. You can be non-consensus and wrong, and then you lose money. If you're consensus, you don't make money, you just make the average money. So to make alpha, to make extra money, you have to be non-consensus by definition. But then the trick is, are you right or wrong? So alpha is non-consensus and right. And I think to explore opportunities for alpha, you can't just do what everyone else is doing. You have to take that risk of doing something non-consensus that might be right and might be wrong. And I think some of these themes around underrepresented founders represent an opportunity for alpha. That is what they are. Silicon Valley was not always consensus. In the 70s and 80s, it was like a crazy way to deploy capital. What are you doing? Now it's completely consensus. So actually the Silicon Valley spirit would be to go somewhere else and look for different founders and do other stuff, not to just pile into the same trade everyone is in. So I think exploring underrepresented founders, underrepresented regions, underrepresented themes, all of that is completely consistent with how the history of the world has made money. It's just the modern version of it.
Yeah. Mac, we haven't heard from you in a while, and I wondered if you might be able to share with us. First of all, if anyone listening to this is interested in learning more about Rarebreed and their manifesto, I think it's a really great read. It's also, and the number 5 in your manifesto reads that sometimes founders at the pre-seed stage aren't as polished. They don't know all the VC lingo, they don't have an amazing network, or don't know how to construct a pitch. Still, as we've all just been discussing, they are just as amazing founders as those founders who have raised tons of money and have deep networks. And reading this, it made me think a lot about something I've noticed here in Latin America as well. For example, like the founders who are able to raise the most funding are often those who have gone to elite schools, have been able to learn and be taught English. Many have also had the opportunity to either study or work abroad in an English-speaking context. And so I'm wondering, this is clearly important to you, but how do you think we can encourage more investors to look past that polish and or lack thereof, right? To really see the potential in these founders?
I don't know, right? Like I can be honest about that. Like I don't know the answer. I'll give, people call the story time with Mac. Cheryl's always messing with me, but I'll give another anecdote. So I have a venture partner who I love dearly. He is my partner. We're going to make a lot of money together. We're going to invest in some great founders. And we had a meeting with the founder, and I told him up front, like, look, this is a first-time founder who's using their pitch deck as a crutch. So even though we're going to ask questions, they're going to keep going back to the deck because that's just how they're able to keep their thoughts in order and move forward. As the pitch started, as the entrepreneurs pitching us, and this is a little inside baseball behind the curtains, while the founder's pitching, we have a Slack channel where we can communicate our notes. And so we're synchronizing on what's going on as the founder's pitching. And as the founder started to pitch, my partner at the time was really down on the founder. She was originally from a part of Europe where she didn't speak English as clearly, right? And so it was hard to understand some of the things she was saying, but you could get it. And as we're going, he's being really negative in the chat. And I'm like, hold on. She's getting to it, right? Like it's in the pitch, it's in there. She just hasn't constructed it right. Let's just wait it out. 30 minutes later, he was finally able to wrap his hands around. He's like, oh, this is amazing. He's like, well, how come she didn't just say this up front? I was like, because she didn't know she needed to, she didn't know how to. And within the first 10 minutes, you were ready to tune her out and say no. I was like, that's not what we do at Rarebreed, right? And he apologized and he got it, but my venture partner is also like somebody who's been in Silicon Valley for a long time and of that world, but like he cares and he believes in this stuff, right? He believes in diversity, he believes there's opportunities. But even for him, somebody who cares and believes in this, he defaulted to like his standard, this is how a VC thinks. And I had to stop him. And we had to be like, look, just let it come. And like, I don't know the answer for that. I don't mind going through that process with a founder because I was that founder, right? Like the first time I pitched, it was terrible. I had no clue what I was doing. And everybody who I pitched to let me know it was terrible, but didn't really push me in the right direction of how to make it better, right? And that's one thing that I'm really big on. When I meet with founders, I'm always going to tell you why. And you may not like it. You may get mad at me, but I'm never going to lie to you, right? And I'm always going to make sure that you leave understanding why I said no or what's going on in this interaction, because I know what it's like to be on the other side, right? And so for me, that's what gives me the empathy, because I've been there, but I don't have an answer on how to give that to all the other investors, right? All I can tell you is like, understand, like, just because a founder's using slang, then they're talking different. Like you even think, like, if we could think back to like 500 startups, super successful venture fund now, everybody knows 500. When they first started, their whole status quo was to make people uncomfortable. They put as much profanity in every one of their pitch decks as humanly possible, just to make everybody in the room uncomfortable. And you know what happened? After a while, everybody got okay with it. They were like, yeah, this is what they do. But they do good work, so it's fine. Because good work will always answer every question. And so as long as you're building a strong company and you have strong economics behind it, you can typically get past all that stuff. But sometimes in the early stage, you're not quite there yet. And, not every investor is empathetic or can step out of that moment to recognize what's going on, to allow a founder to stumble a bit, but understand like the stumble and the way they're pitching, that's just how they pitch. That's a communication thing. That has nothing to do with the business stuff. And sometimes we can get caught up in the communication in the business and making them synonymous, and they're not.
Yeah, and let me just caveat this too. Just let's not say that they don't have polish. I feel like that to me is a kind of, it's, I don't know. I just feel like the cards are already stacked against them, and then to even just put the onus on them as if it's their problem that they're not talking the way we want them to talk. I don't know. I feel like that's just because I see it a lot in how people say that, and it rubs me the wrong way. I think if anything, sometimes actually I'll pause on that side. The only thing I'll say is that the internet has democratized a lot of a lot of information around how VCs want folks to present or their opinions. We were just talking about this, Mac, this week around how VCs also prefer different things, right? Mm-hmm. Like I want a certain style, Mac wants a certain style. You can't cater to every single person, and so to that end, just follow amazing people like Mac on Twitter and like all these other folks that like have opened up their on what they want to see, and so just to really position yourself, in the best light possible.
And so, I know she was about to jump in here, but just to push back on that a little bit, like, yes, it does rub you the wrong way, and it's not fair. But nobody ever said this industry was fair or that it was going to be fair, right? Like the majority of investors aren't me and you. So even though it rubs us the wrong way, we still need to make sure we leave founders understanding, like, this is the game you're up against.
Well, yeah, it's not. Well, yeah, I said it's not fair from the beginning. I'm just saying that we should not be perpetuating that type of language, and we should not accept that. We should, if anything, call it out on others as well, who potentially use it.
I wanted to add one quick thing, but Mac, you should make Storytime with Mac a Clubhouse channel. Right?
That has to. I told him
that needs to be a thing. That needs to exist. So do it. I was just gonna say, an underrepresented founder starting a company is such a difficult decision. It's not a normal decision, and the amount of fear that comes with that step is unusually high. And you're dealing with all of that plus the business idea when you're getting pitched, which is a very different dynamic. And I reflect often on my very young daughters who are 4 and 2. And the most important thing for them to just be their best selves is to feel safe, whatever's happening, just to feel safe. And the underrepresented founder often does not feel safe. They're carrying a big responsibility that I'm doing this crazy thing, and this is such a fancy VC, and maybe I'm not saying the right thing the right way, and you're dealing with all of that in the first few minutes. I think the best thing you can do is help someone feel safe so that you actually get the best out of them. And that's on you. So, and again, like if you want to make money, you have to do things other people aren't doing. So it's to your benefit to be the person that people can be their best self with, because you will find the really interesting thing before other people do.
Yeah.
So we're not evaluators. That's not the job of people investing capital, is to judge. Our job is to find interesting opportunities. And that involves some effort on your end to create an environment where people can present their best self.
Yeah. And
that.
that's super interesting because, yeah, I also remember when we used to, and the most challenging situation I've been with diverse founders in trying to, let's say, get from them what the message they want to pass, right, across in a safe environment, in a trusty environment. First of all, they need to trust you. They need to trust that you have the best interest at heart, that you are not there perhaps to steal their business, etc. And that's perhaps some of the perceptions that I've faced a lot, particularly when I was sitting with indigenous entrepreneurs in Chile, in Colombia, in Panama, so sitting with them, trying to understand what is the idea that you are trying to do. What is really the objective, etc. Until, and it's not on a first meeting. You will never give me a pitch in 5 minutes and that. No, you build the trust first, right? You attend the community meetings. They get to know you and understand. Of course, not every VC fund manager will have that time, but it's the time that takes sometimes to find the hidden gems and really with that preservation and that building of trust, that is required. So in that situation, you have to adapt your language to the language as much as possible that they will understand and feel safe. Even if it's Spanish, don't try and come with a Spanish that is like Queen's Spanish, just try and be a bit more modest the way you speak, and exactly, and you have to adapt. But sometimes I have had entrepreneurs pitching who come with a PhD background, like me. So, okay, I can step up the game and I know he or she will feel comfortable with that language, right? Because it's pitching something more scientific or a product that requires that, right? So I think it's all about as well, you as an investor, customizing your relationships, and that's really difficult to some people because they're like, no, I treat everybody the same, everybody, but it's not like that. People are different. You have to adapt your manner and your approach with different entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and I think definitely it requires, as all of you at this point have mentioned on the panel, it requires perhaps a little bit more effort on our part, right? But the return on investment, then we can now, Shu, am I using this correctly? We can be alpha, or we can make alpha investments.
We can generate alpha.
Generate alpha. All right. We can generate alpha, and I feel like actually
when you say generate, yeah.
Yes, it does. I feel like if that can be like the takeaway from this panel, that, why should we have this focus on investing in underrepresented founders? Because we can generate alpha. So before we close, I would just like to, earlier in the day, we have had an unconscious bias training. And so I wondered if to close, we could each go around and share, if you feel comfortable, either an experience that you've had with bias, or also sort of, a way in which you feel privileged. Because I think that's something that often gets left out of the conversation, at least here in Latin America, is a recognition that those of us who are in this space, we're very privileged to be here, regardless of maybe where we came from. And so I don't know if anyone would like to volunteer. I can also share that.
So I'll go. I'm happy
Thank
to
you,
share
Mac.
both, right? So you want to talk about bias, we can talk about, like, I could go really deep, but we can do something just simple, right? When at one point in time, I was one of the youngest hiring managers on the East Coast of the United States for Booz Allen Hamilton, a large consulting firm. I was 24. And they had a dress code, which I followed modestly, right? But whenever we had construction going on around the building, whenever I walked in, I would always get asked, when's the construction going to be done? Or what time are you bringing mail today? Because the only other black person or black people in the building were either worked in the mailroom or did construction. All right. Like, that's something simple. Mine is, forget the fact that I'm there with like slacks, shirt, tie, and looking really professional. I always got those questions, right? But then, where I experience privilege, this is really simple, right? As a man, I don't have to worry about where I park and if it's well lit. That's something I recognize. Like, I don't have to worry about late at night when I'm walking, are there lights on? Can I go for a run? Now, am I afraid that are there going to be police around? Yes, that's a whole different story, right? But I live in an area where it's, fairly nice, soft. I don't have to worry about that as much. But, the women in my life, even living in a nice area, doesn't matter. Because they are afraid that at any given time, somebody may do something to them. And so they're always looking for safety. They're always looking for things. And so even me as a black man in America who feels like I'm underrepresented, I know I have privileges too. And that's a simple one.
Yeah, I can go next. Something that I think, just a quick example of bias is I was in investment banking. I was the only Latina out of the 150 in my banking class, which was kind of crazy to me, quite frankly. And I was always confused in email chains as the executive assistant, right? And this didn't happen once or twice. It happened so many times, and people didn't believe me. So I started BCCing my vice president at a time on every single time I corrected someone. And it got to the point where he literally had to like talk to the group about it because he was like, this is too much. Like, it happens too often. Like, what is going on here? During one of our lunches. And it was just like, it was simple because like I didn't really have to do anything other than BCC him and show him that this was actually happening. Like, it's not me just making things up. Like, it was enough that he had to say something outright. And he was a great ally. I think he was someone in my life that I could come to for those types of things. So whereas other times, you can't. And then, definitely privileged. I'm an able-bodied person who, I'm not neurodivergent. And something that I recently saw was that, and I made an investment in, was the neurodivergent community, because it's so hard for them to find jobs. It's hard for them to find even friends. And so I invested in a company that actually builds community for neurodivergent people, starting with folks with autism. And then they're going to be spreading to other, neurodivergent communities that are similar. And so it's just, and the reason why I invested too is because I didn't even notice that I had this privilege until I did some, I mapped out the industry. I saw who the players were, competitors, barely any, some that started in Internet 1.0. Like, it was just crazy to me how, they're just not serviced. And so I thought it was an easy decision to make there. So that's just my 2 cents there.
I'll just say it feels like an incredible privilege to be able to give people capital. It's a huge responsibility. And I think the best I can do with that is make sure I listen every time.
Yeah. And I think more than focusing as well on the bias, I think I'll focus more on the privilege side. I see biases every day, as a consumer, raising the fund, as an employee. I mean, like, particularly when you have, let's say, a sensitivity, or let's say your antenna is a bit more, attentive to experiences. But I try not to hold that too much for too long. I just let it go, and it doesn't really help me to have always a chip on my shoulder. I try to let it go and then focus on building something, building solutions and trying to solve problems. But like Shu, I'm also feeling at the moment, and for many years, I have been feeling really, really privileged. Particularly if I compare myself with the average Black woman, 40 years old, coming from the city of Porto Alegre, where I come from, no? PhD, having gone from activist to a technocrat, deciding, multi-million checks and signing multi-million checks, and then becoming an entrepreneur, doing a PhD in economics. I mean, like, first time checking on my family, everybody, so I really feel I have a huge responsibility, and that's why today a lot of my time it's actually listening to those entrepreneurs who have great ideas, perhaps, just need to use my social capital to have the doors open, right? So what I'm investing in, perhaps lending today, is my social capital to entrepreneurs, much more than even money. So, and that has opened a lot of doors, to them. So I feel really, really privileged because of that. And the biases that we see every day, what I said before, people thinking that investing in a diverse, in a thematic fund is activism, is philanthropy. All of these are biases. Even when they say the minimum check is 200 million, so I'm sorry, is also a bias, is an indirect bias, an indirect way of actually excluding emerging managers. I know, I understand their thesis, I understand they are focused, but when you accept to have a meeting with an emerging fund manager that is proposing X and Y and Z, and then during the meeting, you decide to say, okay, it's a 200 million minimum. It's like, it's, you sense the energy changing in the room sometimes, when you want to do more catalytic fund. Everybody wants to make money, but at the end of the day, we need to recognize that Afro entrepreneurs want to own their companies all the way to the end. They want ownership. So if LPs are willing to give a very small check for 50, 60% sometimes what we see of ownership of a company, and that LP is white or is somebody who has has no commitment whatsoever with diversity and inclusion and just wants to make money, it just makes the diverse founder wonder, right? Would this company really, will I really be the owner of this company? So it's better just sell and say goodbye, because it's not. So there is a lot of conflict with inside diverse founders with the issue of property, right? And that's the reason why we need to be mindful. Yeah, we need to make money, but at the same time, how can we build wealth in diverse communities in the process, right? Let's not forget that in the process as well.
Yes, thank you. Wow, I feel like we probably could have kept going. I will just add that, for me, I recognize that it's an immense privilege that I've never had to think about the color of my skin. And I think that is a huge reason why, for example, I also don't ever really feel like I've faced bias for being a woman, but I'm pretty sure that's linked to being white. And of course, that opens a lot of doors for me in Latin America. So I want to thank all of you so much for being here. And I hope that we can continue the conversation. For those who are listening, and also for you guys, well, for those of you who are investing in Latin America at least, through InclusiveX, we are going to be launching at the beginning of April a study on diversity and venture capital in Latin America. So I hope that many of you, if not all of you that are listening and here today, will participate so that we can map the data. As Luana mentioned, we don't have that data for our research for our region yet. We have a lot of data on the US, or still, we could use more everywhere, right? But we don't have any for Latin America. And so our goal in this is to have an intersectional approach. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you later.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.